Ian says Dubai has created land. Actually, they can create more Bitcoin. That's the thing you have to keep in mind about scarce assets versus non-scarce assets. Shares, stocks, all that, very non-scarce. They want to, if their stock price goes up, just like MicroStrategy has, they do a stock split, which doesn't really, a stock split doesn't, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong. And I'm actually going to talk about another question here that I saw online. So this is a good segue into that, actually. But you have to keep in mind here that if you, with the scarcity, if you have a stock that does a stock split, they're not creating new shares. I guess they are, but they're not issuing new shares. The pie itself, the size of the pizza has not changed. They've just cut it into smaller pieces, right? There's a big difference there between making the pizza bigger and cutting the pizza into smaller slices. That's essentially what MicroStrategy did. They didn't issue more shares. They just cut their shares in smaller pieces. They went from, it was a 10-to-1, I think. So for every one share you had a MicroStrategy, you now had 10. So they created new shares, but it's hard to explain, I guess, in a way, but I think that the pizza analogy is best. And that's the next part I want to talk about here, because there's people who worry about that with Bitcoin too. So where is this? Let's get to this. This is, somebody posted this. This was their fear about Bitcoin. Let me find it. So this was a tweet from Bruce Fenton. All right. So he says, there's a possible path for Bitcoin that I fear. We see wild highs, massive adoption by sovereigns and institutions. The Bitcoin is mostly custodied by large banks. Early adopters and current holders all become fabulously wealthy. That's true. Bitcoin sits alongside the US dollar and other fiat as a boring balance sheet item. Fiat keeps on being fiat and little in the world changes. Human freedom doesn't advance. And then he says, number go up is important, but it's not all this is about. So Bruce is still missing the fact that, yes, that is true. And it could happen, and it probably will happen. He's saying that Bitcoin is essentially just going to become an asset that these big institutions and countries hold on their balance sheet. That's what he's saying. And he's saying that fiat's going to keep being fiat. Human freedom doesn't advance. Number go up is important, but it's not everything. So what Bruce is failing to understand here about Bitcoin is that it doesn't really matter if that happens. It doesn't. What does that hurt? That actually increases its value. If countries are holding Bitcoin as like their number one savings vehicle, that means it's incredibly valuable. So what's the problem there? It does not matter if everybody's using it. It doesn't matter if everybody has a Bitcoin wallet. That's not the point of this. The point is that they can create all the fiat currencies they want. They can create all the altcoins that they want. It does not matter. Bitcoin is a scarce asset. And if you can value everything based on that, everything is accurate. You have a fair starting point, an equal starting point for everybody that nobody can manipulate, nobody can alter, and nobody can create more of. That's the key there. It doesn't matter what it's used for. It matters that we have something fixed to measure everything else against. That's the point of Bitcoin. And I think I replied to it saying that imagine how valuable it's going to be if that happens. And it still could be a currency. They're not going to lock all the Bitcoin up. That wouldn't make any sense. And they couldn't anyways, because they'd have to take it from us. But he said, well, then it takes away the currency aspect of it. And I said, no, it doesn't. Because what did I say? I said, if you had a car and I wanted to buy that in Bitcoin, and all these countries, all these big institutions have recognized Bitcoin as their number one savings vehicle, the number one store of wealth, then wouldn't you want some of that? And if I paid you in Bitcoin for that car, that's a currency. So, people are very concerned about the fact that we're going to have Bitcoin and we're still going to have fiat, but that's bound to happen. That's exactly what Trump wants to do, is The US dollar isn't going to go away here. They're just going to back it with a real fixed asset like we used to do with gold before 1971, except way better because we can see how much Bitcoin they have. We could not see how much gold they had. We cannot create more Bitcoin like they could just create more gold. This is a pretty familiar analogy on the show, but just think about gold. If the price of gold shot up tomorrow from 2,000 to 10,000, what would happen? There'd be a bunch of new gold mining companies pop up because all of a sudden it's a lot more profitable to be mining gold. So what would happen after that? The supply would increase. What would happen after that? The price would drop back down. That's economics. And you can't do that with Bitcoin. If the price of Bitcoin went from 60,000 to 600,000 tomorrow, there's nothing that anybody can do about it. It's a fixed asset with a fixed, scarce asset with a fixed supply and a known schedule. So we couldn't just go out to the mountains and find more Bitcoin. So the demand might not ever catch up with the supply. Unlike gold, where you just create new supply to meet the demand. And eventually, once that happens, the price starts falling back down. So it's important to realize the fact that it's not all about the entire world having access to Bitcoin, which hopefully they do. But the point here is that we start valuing everything with a fixed asset instead of, as we talked about, an inflationary 2 to 6% every year. Unknown. We have no idea how many US dollars are out there, and we have no idea how much they're going to be printing in the next couple of years to pay off $35 trillion worth of debt. It's an absolute no-brainer at this point. They're not even comparable. There's and it really it bothers me that it's taking people this long to figure it out. It really does. Even I've talked to so many smart, intelligent people in the last couple of years about Bitcoin. They're interested in it, but they still can't wrap their head around it. And I get it because it's so different than the system that we were born into. But fuck,